What Han saw after opening the door wasn't what he was expecting. Chaos and people screaming in the streets, along with fires breaking out, was what he anticipated. Silence and the darkness was all he saw. "Is there something wrong?" Grace, the police officer, asked. Her voice trembled, expecting only horrible news, as the screams were still heard down the hallway. A rattling of chains was heard, causing Han to look down the hallway. "What was that?" Jennifer whispered to the group. "I think someone touched the handcuffs at the beginning of the hallway," Grace answered while slowly pulling out her gun. Hearing the snap of the metal button on the gun holster, Han said, "Don't bother with that. At best, you'll slow it down for a second, based on the noises we heard. And at worst, you'll attract others from both inside the station and outside if there are any." Grace still seemed to pull out her gun. "I'm not joking, and that isn't a suggestion," Han sternly said. When Grace turned her head to him, a look of annoyance and anger crossed her face. "You heard the voices. Even if your coworkers are incompetent, I would think they would be able to make a headshot at such a close range. I don't need to explain what that means, do I?" There was a long pause as Grace seemed to run through the words that Han had said. She looked down in embarrassment and nodded her head before inserting her weapon back into its holster. "Isn't that the woman at the front?" his mother asked in confusion. Around the corner came the woman he had seen when coming into the station. From the look of her appearance, she looked terrified and was cautious in her movements. It took her a moment before realizing they were at the end of the hallway. Relief crossed her face upon knowing that there were others. Seeing that she was still cautious, Han waved for her to hurry up and come towards them. With a sense of urgency, the secretary quickly made her way over to them. When she got close enough, Han could see that she had tears streaming down her face, causing her makeup to run. "Harmony, what happened? And how did you get here?" Grace asked. "We don't have time for this," Han said to the two of them. Looking back at the two women, he said, "With what just happened, seeing what I saw outside, I think we need to be even more careful. We need to go to some place that is safe and where we can take a breather." Seeing the look on their faces, he shook his head. "You'll see in a second, and it should look just as odd to you. Do either of you know a place that's outside the city but may have food?" "My parents live on a farm just outside the city limits," the secretary told them. She first looked at Grace, but then turned towards him, waiting for approval. "That works. Once we're outside, none of you say a word. Just accept that everything seems off, and if you do see something, then just tap on my shoulder and point to it." He looked at each one of them. To the secretary, he said, "Since you know how to get there, we'll be following you. Keep in mind that we need to avoid others and stay off the roads, or any place where people are likely to be, really." Han waited until the woman nodded her head in understanding. Placing a finger on his lips to remind them, he slowly opened the door again and stepped out of the station. Again, Han saw the eerily quiet night scenery that would look normal in everyday life, but in a situation where some creature came into the station, it was disconcerting. Instead of trying to look sneaky while walking away from the building, Han walked out casually, like he usually would. Glancing behind him, Han observed everyone following after him. Unlike the way he was standing, all of them were crouching. "Just walk like you normally would. You're going to make yourself more tired if you're crouching the whole time, and then you won't be able to react properly." He kept his voice lower instead of whispering. One by one, They stood up and looked around at everything. It took them a while to understand what Han was telling them. Jennifer was the first one whose eyes widened when the connection was made. She looked at him, and he nodded his head to confirm her suspicions. Walking towards Harmony, he gently laid his hand on her arm. She was slightly startled by the contact, but seeing him tilt his head to indicate a direction, she understood. It took her a moment to orient herself, but soon after she was walking away from where they were. Han followed after her, wondering if where they were heading was safer. Instead of staying inside the city, Han knew that leaving the place was better. This was especially true with how unusual the neighborhood was. They had been walking for a while, passing by houses and small stores, trying to observe anything similar to what they had heard. In order to prevent themselves from being noticed, they successfully kept quiet and didn't talk amongst themselves. As the houses slowly dwindled and the number of trees increased, Han understood that they were likely near the city's limits. Off in the distance, gunshots were going off and causing them to turn around to look. Due to how far away they were, hearing any sounds was unlikely. In a different direction, there was another shot being fired. The creatures were likely just making their way into the homes. It would be nice to know if they used sight, sound, or both for finding their prey. "Let's keep going," Han said to them. Harmony affirmed his words by heading in the direction they were going. Behind them, the number of gunfires was rapidly increasing. Crunching of leaves and cracking of twigs reverberated through the forest as they continued their journey. Han wondered whether the neighborhood, before the chaos erupted, or the woods they were traveling through was worse. If any of them are in the woods, then we should be able to hear them with all the foliage, Han thought to himself. Harmony turned her head and pointed in front of them. "What is it? Trouble?" he asked. Harmony shook her head. "My parents' farm will soon be in sight," she explained. "Before we get any closer, I think it's important to say something which you may not like to hear," Han said to her. "What do you mean?" "There isn't an easy way to say this, so I'll just say it straight. On the off chance that those things have reached this location, there's a chance that your parents are dead. Or one of them," he said. Han tried to see anything on her face to betray any emotions. For everyone else, the moonlight made it hard for them. The expected angry expression wasn't seen, but instead, Han saw grief and sadness on her face. "It's something I didn't want to think about, but seeing that thing in the station, I think I understood that everything was going to change." She laughed a bitter laugh. "I had watched the same movie that Harold had watched. Those ridiculous B-rated horror movies where those people come back from the dead." Seeing that Harmony was beginning to unravel, Han reached out and gently held her hand. At first, she seemed to fight it, but eventually, her hand relaxed and accepted the feelings he was trying to intertwine with hers. Looking at the hand that was holding hers, she said, "I saw that man come in, and I knew that something was wrong with him. Instead of thinking that they could handle it, I scrambled over the divider and made my way to where prisoners left out in the back. When I heard the words Harold had said, I hoped that it was going to work. I waited. I really did wait. Until I saw the bullet go through that man's head and nothing happened. We might as well have thrown pencils at him for all the good bullets did." Her voice slowly increased in volume. Han used his other hand and carefully guided her head towards his chest. I just left them behind and just thought about getting out of there. My parents are probably dead inside." Her voice was muffled by a shirt. She reached around his back with her other arm to feel that reassurance. After experiencing such things and having to keep it bottled up for necessity's sake,